everyone. Welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And of course, we're always blessed to be joined by our producer, Wes Davenport. If you are not listening to Wes and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel, you absolutely should be. You should obviously be reading everything that Omari Sankofa II is doing over on the Detroit Free Press. And then, since it is absolutely free, make sure you are subscribed to and reading the Motor City Hoops Substack, where I'm putting out game notes and occasionally video breakdowns. O2, I need you to do something for me. I need you to go to JB tomorrow at practice or before the game and let him know that I apologize for not believing in this team's ability to pull off the win on Friday night against the Sixers. That's my bad.
I don't know. I think a lot of people owe apologies for last week. Those were just the types of games that over the course of an 82-game season, you kind of mentally write off. Like, they're down their top 2 scorers. They're down their top defender. Well, top 2 defenders with Stu just not coming back in that last game. You're probably not going to win against other playoff teams. And just shows what we know that, Paul Reed and Daniss Jenkins and all these guys that we're going to talk about have stepped up and won convincingly. Not even like them getting lucky, but them just going out and genuinely going out and playing great connected basketball on both ends. You can't predict that type of stuff, right? But it also just shows how much this team has grown just in the last calendar year that they could do that. And it's shocking, but also coming off of last season, you would also expect there to be some sort of connectivity that they're just not showing to have this early in the season, I think, for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, Wes says, I don't often believe in culture wins. Those were culture wins. It does seem like, as somebody out in Kansas, as Derek, we will answer your question about tornadoes later in the episode. I honestly, I'm not around the team. You can get these vibes a little bit better. Thank you, O1, for joining us as always. But it does seem like there's a real connectiveness, chemistry. As Wes says, you don't always like to hear those things, and because it's truly not easy to understand. I said on the radio earlier this week with our guy Anthony Bellino and Lomas, I think I brought that up last week, or maybe I brought that up, but it just does seem like they have that, right? I've only been on one team where I felt that, but it was a real thing, and it helped us win these games. It helped us come through tough moments or injuries or whatever it was. Thank you, Mel. Yes, hit the like button if you are here. But yeah, it seems like this team, I don't want to overstate it, O2, but it seems like there's just something real that they've built between the roster and then whatever JB and his staff are doing with the roster.
Yeah, this is what we used to see teams do against the Pistons, where some of their top guys would be out, and it's maybe this is one they could steal, and you just see bench guys step up and play some of the games of their lives. That used to happen to the Pistons, it seems like a lot, and now they're the team doing that to other people. But like you said, I think when you get to a certain level of buy-in and confidence, and I think you also have to give credit to the front office for their backup plan this offseason, going off the Cares and Duncan, I think paying off really richly for him this past week. And you could put Javonte Green in there as well. And then also retaining Paul Reed. And if you recall, they picked him up off waivers last year, and then they waived him and then re-signed him to a cheaper deal, and then were able to retain him this summer, I think, on a 2-year contract. So it's from top to bottom. I think it starts with the players in the locker room, and then, of course, it's coaching and system. But I think more importantly is guys coming in and believing that they're a part of something bigger and could actually rise to that occasion. Even guys like Chaz Lanier, Tolu Smith, they've had moments this past week. Everybody stepping up to play, I think. Like Wes said in our private chat over here, our culture wins for this team.
Drew Brait says, Pistons and Chiefs fan here. Needless to say, I have double screen going. That's an interesting combination there. Devon says, finally can watch this live at my second job, and they let us have phones. My other job's been tripping. They don't understand the Pistons are the number 1 seed. I don't know that has fully wrapped in my head, O2, while we've talked about how good they've been and these wins, and we'll get into this in the play of guys like Daniss Jenkins and Paul Reed and Javonte Green, and even some of the vets like Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert, and maybe disappointing play from Ron Holland. I don't always think about this is the number 1 seed in the East. I quickly am to point out that they've won 9 in a row and are 11-2, but then I don't really fully grasp what they've done. It's just really, really impressive where they are 13 games into the season.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't think it's clicked to be like they're the number one team either. It's just so early in the season. I mean, we're on week 3. There's just still so much basketball to be played. And I mean, this time last year, they still had a losing record. I mean, there's just a lot of basketball that's going to be played. At some point, they're eventually going to have some sort of rough patch, whether that's 2-game, losing streak, or whatever it is, will remain to be seen. You're reluctant to read too deeply into something this early in the year just because you know teams are still rounding into shape. And it feels like the NBA doesn't really get started until around Christmas anyway. If this feels like the second preseason, but you also don't want to devalue what they're doing. And that's showing that they can win games in a variety of ways with a variety of different players. They're not just a team that needs K to go out and do everything for them anymore. You know, you could steal games against the likes of the Bulls and the Sixers with the roster you have now. And that's something that, regardless of what rough patch you hit, whatever it happens, I think this stuff can help you in the long run.
So Walter Ramirez says, glad I can catch you guys live once again. Shout out to my favorite Pistons pod, the Pistons Pulse. What up, Doe, from the Philippines? And we love it. We love hearing about our listeners, our viewers from all over the world. I do think that what Billy Donovan, I don't usually listen to post-game pressers, but it showed up on my feed. What he said after that Pistons win over the Bulls was really enlightening in terms of talking about how close and how the gap between players in the NBA isn't as much as what fans want to think sometimes. And I think it probably is about consistency, right? Can Daniss Jenkins do what he's done over the last 2 for 82 games in this role in the way Cade Cunningham does? Probably not. But is Daniss Jenkins talented enough to do it for a 2-game stretch, a 4-game stretch, a 5-game stretch? Absolutely. And we'll talk about his long-term role in just a second. But what Donovan said was, my team isn't good enough. My guys have to learn that nobody's good enough just to walk on the court and beat the opposition, because in the NBA, the other team is going to be very talented regardless. And I think we've really seen that as people watching these Pistons games over the last 2, especially. So let's get into the performances of some of these guys. And we got to start with Daniss Jenkins. This is the guy we've been talking about for a while. Summer League performance went really well, and he has taken this opportunity, O2, and absolutely run with it.
Yeah, I mean, from that first game where he knocks down 2 3-pointers in the final 5 seconds, including the second one at the buzzer to tie that game and get them a win that it looked like they were probably not going to get up until he hit those 2 shots. Impressive, for him to follow up the next game, and I think just really do a good job embracing that point guard role. I can't remember which game it was he had 12 and which one he had 8 assists, but I thought he did a really good moving the ball in that second game. And then, I mean, the half-court shot that kind of helped them get some momentum going against the Sixers. He's made so many plays over this past week that I think after watching him in Summer League and seeing some of the stuff he did in the G League, you knew that he was capable of rising to the moment. But to do it game after game after game when they needed him most, I think is what adds to that. But like you said, we've been talking about Daniss for a while. We knew he could play. We figured that if he had an opportunity, he would show that he could rise to the moment. But it's tough to project him having the type of week he had, where I think it's fair to say they don't win any of those games if Daniss doesn't do what he did.
Yeah, I mean, just a crazy performance in both. He's shooting 55% from 3. He's made big shots. That's the thing is, it's the Wizards game is the one where it started, right? With the huge shot to send the game into overtime. And then you come back next and he's running the show. And he's shooting really well from 3. He's able to create, he plays with really good pace. He has a really good cadence. He's breaking down the Chicago defense, just really good stuff. And then he just got to the paint anytime he wanted to in the first half. And then he backs it up in the second game as well. And what made me laugh in that one, and we saw this at Summer League firsthand, O2, this dude is talking trash to Tyrese Maxey, talking trash to the Sixers bench. He's fearless. He is absolutely fearless. And at the end of the day, he backs it up with his performances.
Yeah, I mean, he's fearless. I think he's relentless. I think the way he just constantly talks when he's on the floor meshes with this team's general play style. And it's like he said after the game, you got to be able to back it up too. And he's backed it up. He's going to toe with these guys. What's interesting is that him and Tyrese are on the same age. They're both out of Dallas. And he said that was the first time that they had played each other, which I think also just shows how much Daniss has risen, just over the last few years, transferring multiple times. Obviously, that's what on with the G League last season. But he just fits. I mean, game-wise, but also personality-wise, I think all of that has factored into just how impressive his week has been. Like a lot of guys talk smack, but for him to come in and, he's got no NBA credentials to his name and he's backing up everything he says, I think that adds to how impressive his week has been.
So the 3-game stretch, 20 points per game in 36 minutes, 47% from the field, 56% from the line, a 3-point line. Obviously, that won't hold long term. I will note only 4 free throw attempts in 3 games, but 5 rebounds, just under 8 assists, almost 2.5 steals, and just under 2.5 turnovers. I think this is the real question, Omari, is where does he fit? What does, Carmel Unicorn asked, and I want to just start with Jenkins for now. And they mentioned Reed, Jenkins, Green all stepped up. What does the rotation look like if everybody becomes healthy soon? So my question is, O2, you agree that Jenkins should be in the rotation until Ivy or Sasser come back, right? Like I want to talk about post Ivy Sasser return in just a second, but this guy should play over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks in the regular rotation, at least until one or both of those guys comes back, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. They need that secondary ball handling and they need that shot making. And he's done both, I think, at a pretty high level. He had 5 3-pointers against Philly?
I think that's right. 5 of 7 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's
5 of 8.
Everything you would need. 5 of 8. I think he did this one late, but he's done it like everything you would want from that role. So I'm not sure who's necessarily pushing him out of that role until Sass and Ivy come back. And when they come back, of course, that's an entirely different discussion on how they're going to sort through that. But until they get to that point, he's doing stuff that they need out there and don't have.
Okay, so let's have that discussion. And I think we'll get more sample over the next few weeks. But let's say those 2 guys come back. And let's just say Ivy comes back and they insert him into the starting lineup. Just for simplicity's sake, they go Cade, Ivy, Asar, Harris, Duren. Off the bench, you're obviously going to play Levert, Robinson, Holland, Stu. If you want to play a 10-man rotation, there's one more spot available. Marcus Sasser, Javonte Green, Daniss Jenkins. Do you think Jenkins should stay in that rotation, or do you give an opportunity to Sasser coming back? Javonte Green has been really good in his own right. I suppose there's an argument you could, depending on how you wanted to organize the rotations, it could be Paul Reed. Like, ultimately, my question is, O2, is he going to stay in the rotation when this team is healthy? Because I find myself not having a positive answer, but I also want to see him in the rotation. Like, I don't want to see him be forgot about when this team is healthy.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how he continues to play up until we get to the point to where those guys continue to come back. Because it may be, like, who's to say? J.I. is just like getting back to on-court work, and we saw him get some pregame stuff in last week, but, he's still not quite at the point to where he's been, I don't want to say he's been fully cleared, but he's doing on-court work, so I don't know exactly how far away that places him as far as returning. But regardless, I think if Daniss continues to put these types of performances together, it'd just be harder and harder and harder to not justify keeping them in a rotation when some of these guys come back. One thing that I know JB said in the past that could be tested here is, he just doesn't believe in guys losing rotation spots due to injury. And I would think that when, Sasser comes back, he would have a chance to show what he could do. But with that, I think when you have, a player in Sass who, again, I think in perfect circumstances was probably going to be that third ball handler, like at best anyway, maybe there's a different type of discussion there. But I don't think they're going to write Sasser completely off. I think regardless, he'll still have a chance to come in and do what he does. But obviously the pressure's on for him and he's going to have to contribute to winning as well, because Daniss has done what he's done over the past 3 games, and you can't ignore that aspect of it.
Depth is a good thing in the NBA. The Detroit Pistons have it right now, and I think Jenkins is going to get his opportunity over the next few weeks. And the answer to this question will be more clear after going through that. Michael asks, do you think they can make it past the trade deadline without converting Jenkins to a standard? Is it fair to say they should defer that decision until post-deadline? So I want to pull this up from Bobby Marks. A reminder on two-way rules can be active for 50 games. Daniss has 38 remaining. I think that was it's either before one of these games or both of these games. Obviously, if he's on two-way, not eligible for the playoffs, contract can be converted up until the last day of the regular season. So I assume where this question is coming from is right now, if you look at the Pistons roster, it's really hard to cut anybody other than Isaac Jones, who has a non-guaranteed deal. Javonte Green's guaranteed for just under $1 million. I don't think you're cutting that guy. So I assume this question is stemming from, like sometimes at the trade deadline, you want that open roster spot for uneven trades in terms of number of players. And so do you want to cut Isaac Jones to give it to Daniss Jenkins? And then now you would have to cut somebody else if you wanted to make a trade that is a 3 for 2, 2 for 3 or 3 for 4 or 1 for 2 or whatever, or a draft pick for a player. We talk all the time about the trade exception that they have. Well, now you'd have to attach a player in that deal as opposed to just, some sort of protected second round, whatever. So I don't know that this is a decision that they make soon, but I feel like this is where it's stemming from. And I think it's at least worth kind of hashing out all the details of Jenkins' situation, because if he becomes a real part of the rotation, this could become a real part of the decision.
Yeah, Isaac Jones hasn't played. Like, he being a guy who's a power forward center kind of hybrid, he does feel some positional need. But I think if it comes down to, okay, we have a guy that could actually play versus somebody who's more hypothetical and he hasn't even gotten on the floor yet, then you probably go with the guy that could play. Now, I'm not reporting anything. That's just more so be projecting out. Like, we have to see what Isaac Jones could do, but, I don't know if his hypothetical contribution outweighs what you've already seen from a guy like Daniss, if it does come down to that point. Obviously, the trade deadline is 3 or 4 months away. It's November, so 3 months away. You have time to make some sort of move if it does come down to that point, and you decide, hey, we do need to keep Daniss because he can only play so many games, and at some point that two-way restriction probably does more harm than good if he continues doing what he's done. Somebody brings in, we could talk about that aspect of it later if it gets to that, but they're going to have some sort of roster crunch to figure out. And, maybe it's just you can part ways with Isaac Jones and, call it at that. Maybe you need to create a second spot. They're going to have some self decisions to figure out soon, which is a good problem to have that upward pressure where you're having to solve these things or at least even consider these questions this early into the season.
I mean, I think it's worth noting he has 38 games. So if we're 13 into the season, so that would get you to 51 games. You got to be close to the trade deadline at that point where you would have an idea. And I don't know that Daniss Jenkins plays the next 38 games for the Pistons. I mean, that's where you can be a little strategic. When Ivy gets back, when Sasser gets back, you can pick out a stretch of games where like, hey, we're not going to play Jenkins in these. We're going to let Sasser get his opportunity in the second unit, knowing that maybe maybe that you need to save some games there. Wendell Moore Jr. is also on a two-way, just for what it's worth. So
yeah, he's on a two-way, so you wouldn't be able to alleviate that with him.
A quick check of the Pistons roster, just because it can get confusing with some of the moving parts. Daniss, Moore Jr., and Tolu are all on two ways. Everybody else is the 15-man roster is full. All of the guys including Bobby Klintman, Isaac Jones, Chaz Lanier, all of these deals are guaranteed. Other than Javonte Green's is only guaranteed for $925,000, and Isaac Jones has no guarantee whatsoever. Obviously, you could waive you won't waive Bobby Klintman, but you could waive guys, but then that would be dead money and future numbers and stuff like that. But that's kind of yes. So Bobby could be waived. Yes, he could. Then that's just dead money, for the rest of the season. So there's always mechanisms to do it, but that is if Pistons need to waive one to get Beasley, they can go. Yes, I mean, you can always waive a guy, guys. And so you could waive Cade Cunningham if you wanted. You're just eating all of that money that's left on his deal this year. And
they waived Josh Smith.
Well, I don't know that you could waive Cade because I think there's a rule in terms of how much money, right? Because it was either the Bradley Beal one or the Damian Lillard one. But in theory, you can waive guys to create roster spots. It's if the money is guaranteed, though, then you have to eat that money without them being on your roster. And so that's why I bring up guys like Javonte Green and Isaac Jones, is because their guarantees are a little bit lower or nothing. All right, we're going to go to break. When we come back, I want to answer a question. It's kind of a fun question about the in-season tournament or NBA Cup or whatever the heck the NBA calls it. I don't know. That's probably not good from a guy that covers the NBA, but I do know that when they play those games because the courts look different. I know that part. By the way, the Sixers jerseys, those were nice. You know I'm not a jerseys guy, O2, but that jersey stood out to me, O2.
Are you talking about the ones on Friday or the throwback ones Sunday?
No. The throwback, it took me back to the AI days.
Yeah.
Those
were nice. And the court was nice too. I enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, I rarely notice that stuff, but that night I noticed. So let's go to break. When we come back, we'll talk NBA Cup, and then we'll talk Javonte Green and Paul Reed.
All right, we are back with segment 2. The Pistons are 2-0 in NBA Cup play after defeating the Sixers last Friday. It was like 114 to 103 or something like that. 114 to 105, I think, actually. Let's talk about Paul Reed, former Sixer. He actually got a nice ovation when he checked in on Sunday, which was interesting because Philly's a pretty hard crowd. So that just shows how beloved B-Ball Paul was there. But I think he went on and showed why he was so beloved this past week, just with the extent that he balled out, and he really did ball out. I have his numbers right. Well, if I did have them, they're being put up. All right. Yeah. I mean, last game, you have 10 points, 8 rebounds. I know he had some blocks, 3 blocks. He had a 28, 13, 6 assists, 4 steal performance against Chicago, 8 and 9 against Washington. He showed his full back this week, really. I'm pretty sure the 6 assists were a career high. He's scoring inside, he's scoring outside. The defense up and down has been great. I want to hear what you've thought about Paul Reed this past week, because again, he's in that same category as Daniss, where if he doesn't do that, I don't know if they win any of those games.
So Pistons fan ask about, does the organization value the NBA Cup? I don't know what the organization does or does not think about it. I think they should value it. I think it puts you in a little bit higher leverage games than just a normal regular season game. And I think that would be great for this team to be. We saw it last year, O2, right? It went down to the wire with them and the Bucks to the final, not like the actual tournament or whatever, but the 4th game or whatever. And whoever won that game, I think, was going to get in. So I think it would be awesome for them to get in. And then you see them not just on a national stage, but against good competition where the other teams playing a little bit more of a meaningful game as well. As for Paul Reed, I think you outlined it a little bit earlier, just what Trajan has done with him, keeping him on the roster. You mentioned the 2-year contract. So he's on the books for 5.3 this year, 5.6 next year. That's not a team option. That's not a player option. That's just straight up 5.6. So a straight 2-year, probably roughly $11 million deal for Paul Reed. He's an awesome third center. O2. You need these type of guys. I don't think I would be crazy positive of if Paul Reed was the starting center or the backup center in a playoff series and in a playoff run. But if you want to get home court advantage in the playoffs, if you want to fight for that theoretically gives you a better opportunity to win playoff games, even though that's not how it played out last year for the Pistons. Having a guy like Paul Reed helps you do that. He helps you win regular season games. You're absolutely right. They don't win probably either of these games. Definitely not the Chicago game without him, but he plays 30 minutes against Chicago, 25 against Philly, even against Philly. Here's the thing. Even against Philly, O2, 10 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. That's a stat line that is impactful, right? And so I think having him as a third center on this roster is huge. It's great work by Trajan, and especially just the type of player that Paul Reed is, because his style of play, you just put him on the court and let him go make an impact.
Yeah, we said when he was signed that he was probably a little bit overqualified as a backup center, and that he was comfortably the best third center that they've had, at least in the last 6 years. And over the course of an 82-game season, you feel that impact. That was definitely true last season, and that's been even more true through their first 13 games this season. To have a center who comes off the bench and it's just essentially the Tasmanian devil for however long you need him to do. Can basically check whatever box you need him to check. plays so hard, athletic. He could be a lob guy if you need him to. He rebounds. His block and steal numbers for a center are off the charts. Like, I've checked on cleaning the glass, and I'm pretty sure he's above the 95th percentile, in steal and block rate among centers. Of course, some of that's just because he's playing fewer minutes and can give all out. But regardless, he has a very unique ability, like you said, to just impact every aspect of the game and like rack those steals and blocks up, which makes a difference. But yeah, I mean, 5 stocks. I don't know how many minutes he played, but yeah, he's been great. He's been great. I would assume this past week is one of the best weeks of basketball he's had, and it's got to make you feel even more comfortable going forward. Just knowing that guys like Stu and Duran will have foul trouble or maybe a ticky-tacky injury here and there, that P. Reed could go out there and like lead the way however you need him to lead the way on either end.
So just looking at some per 100 numbers, and it is important context, like you brought up, whenever you're not playing the consistent minutes and stuff like that, the stuff can get skewed just a little bit. But per 100, he's only behind Jalen Duren on this team in rebounds per 100 possessions. And it's not that far behind. Now, he's awesome on the offensive board. He actually gets more than Duren per 100. Duren's been better on the defensive boards, but he's number 1 on this team in steals per 100 possessions. He's second in blocks per 100 possessions behind only Isaiah Stewart. And then he's shooting 71% from 2-point. And I think he even hit a couple threes in one of these games. I can't remember which one it was. It must have been the Chicago game where he hit a couple threes. So just, yeah, Melo75, B-ball is a delight. I love the footage of him getting or giving the belt in the locker room. Really cool stuff there. Let's move on to Javonte Green. He's the other one that I think in this stretch, and really not even just this stretch, Omari, I think all year long, I think he's played in every single game for the Pistons. Yeah, he has. And he only played 9 minutes opening night and then at least double digits in every game since. This has been a real contributor to the Pistons all season long. And in that Philly game, he drops 21 points and has a big night. But another like Trajan Langdon filling in the roster, and this guy has been awesome at doing it.
Yeah, just look at his last few games where he has 21 points, 9 rebounds, couple blocks at a steal in 36 minutes against Philly. The 21 points were a season high for him. The game before that, he was a plus 16 with 9 points, 4 rebounds. He had a few turnovers, but I thought the defensive energy he brought off of the bench, you could absolutely feel. And then before that, you have a double, 11 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks and a steal. So he's just another guy that's making an impact on both ends. His defense, his athleticism, just the way he pushes the pace. I think there's some, parallels of what you get from Asar in that regard, just in the standpoint of he's not the best shooter, but he's still going to make an impact offensively just because of his sheer activity. And like you mentioned, he's played double digits in every game except that first game. And he hasn't even shot the ball particularly well. So again, I think it's just the way he meshes with that bench unit with guys like Stu, Ron Holland. There's just a lot of chaos. Paul Reed, there's just a lot of chaos, a lot of athleticism. And I think he really thrives in that environment. And his impact to me has gone beyond just what the raw stats say.
It's funny looking at the minutes played this year, O2, because Pistons fan 11 brings up something interesting. Like, I'm not trying to like throw shade at Troy Weaver right now, but finding a guy like Javonte Green, finding a guy like Daniss Jenkins, we always talked about that over the last 4 or 5 years with this organization was, where is that two-way guy that all of a sudden looks like an NBA player? Where's that random free agent that comes in, that wing that's making an impact? And, Trajan in year 1, it looks like he's done a really nice job of that with Javonte. I guess Daniss wouldn't be his. That would be a Troy Weaver one. Shout out Troy Weaver there for that one. But who do you think leads the team in minutes played this year?
Cade.
It's close. Duncan Robinson. Then Cade. Then Duren. Then Holland. Javonte Green is 5th. And so Asar, Stu, Harris, LeVert are 6 through 9 in minutes played this year for the Pistons. Like, those guys are pretty important rotation players, along with the fact that Jaden Ivey hasn't even played yet. And this team is 11-2 and, winners of 9 in a row. Just incredible stuff. Mel does bring up Javonte's 3-point percentage isn't great. He does make timely ones. I do think that is an important point to make in terms of what is he able to provide you in the playoffs? Because if he isn't able to knock down shots, or at least the timely shots, it's hard to have him on the court, especially if Ron's not making shots, Asar obviously not shooting it, Jalen Duren's not spacing it. Could be a little bit of a crunch there. I assume we'll see him get consistent minutes throughout the regular season. I feel like Javonte, as much as I love his game, might end up being a guy that doesn't end up in the playoff rotation if the team is healthy. Speaking of Duncan Robinson, though, that guy all of a sudden now is shooting 43% on almost 7 attempts from 3, averaging 12.5 points over this little stretch where Detroit has played a little bit shorthanded. So his last 4, let's just go the last 4. 0-2. Duncan Robinson is averaging 17 points on 50% from 3 on 8.5 attempts per game. I would say Detroit would take that.
Yeah, that 0 for 5 performance from 3 against Chicago, and like their opener is like a distant memory. I mean, he's been lights out pretty much since then. I also want to point out that he's got 23 assists and 8 turnovers so far. So that's almost a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I think the secondary playmaking, especially over the last few games, has been pretty evident for him. Like the interior finishing, I think he's had some plays here and there. He's been as advertised, but he's playing at the level you would expect to need him to play at, especially during a stretch like this. Obviously, you're giving up something defensively that he's out there, but I think he shot the ball so well that you can more than live with that. He's knocked out 39 of 93 pointers through 13 games. I think you absolutely take that. And that's exactly what you want from Duncan Robinson, and he's really stepped up, I think, this past week.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's finding his role, his flow within the offense. I always like to track some of the numbers in terms of the play type. So pulling it up now, he's still not shooting it well in transition, which is kind of crazy. He's just 4 of 17. I think that's where, obviously they're not missing it crazy, but that's where Tim Hardaway Jr., I feel like, really thrived. But again, I've brought this up multiple times. Pick and roll ball handler, he's 6 of 11. He's made some tough ones, but he is able to knock down threes off the dribble. Yeah, he's 12 of 23 off the dribble threes this season. That's over 50%. Obviously, 40% on catch and shoot. And what we saw in the Sixers game was his gravity. And he got Paul Reed some buckets early in that game just because defenders are paying so much attention to him. Then if you're the one that set the screen, you can be the guy that, rolls out, and then he's a good enough passer to make that. So really, really nice job there. I think he's a smart player. He made a really nice play at the end of the Sixers game. End of the first half, where he turned down what could have been a transition 3-point attempt, made sure the Pistons got the last shot. Listen, the defense is really bad at the point of attack. It is not good. Teams are they're going to survive it in the regular season. I feel very confidently that they can survive it in the regular season. I'm terrified what it's going to look like in the playoffs, and I think they have to have an answer. I finally saw him in one of these 2 games do I call it the Steph Curry. I'm sure Curry's not the first one to do, but they keep Steph Curry out of switches and mismatches because he hard hedges ball screens. So when teams bring him into a ball screen, he'll step up and hedge. His teammate will navigate, and then he'll bit back to his man. I feel like Detroit has started to do that a little bit with Duncan Robinson, and that's how you keep him out of some of those mismatches where teams are trying to attack him.
Yeah, I'm curious about the playoffs too, because you see it during the regular season, and we have seen it during the regular season, but especially in the playoffs, your defense is only as good as your weakest defender. I don't want to say only as good as your weakest defender, but it's a more severe issue where, I think having a weak defender in a 5-man unit can really penalize you down the stretch. They have a long way, obviously, to kind of worry about that. But, there are some ways to hide them. I think they've got, people around him that can insulate him a little bit. Obviously, Sarge, Javonte Green, Ron, NK, it's been good enough defensively where you could put him, I think, on a better matchup than Duncan. Yeah, some of that we'll have to see. But in hindsight, it makes sense that he's leading the team in minutes, given that K has missed a couple of games. I think before last game, K was number 1. I remember seeing that. And that's probably what pushed. Somebody said the Broncos beat the. But yeah, no, I think that Duncan's been good. We just have to see, again, what they could do with him defensively as the season goes on.
Chuck says by the playoffs, he's going to be coming off the bench, easier to hide. I agree with that to an extent. It just depends on the 3-point shooting of the rest of the roster. I realize we don't expect him to be starting all season, but if Jaden Ivey's not knocking down threes at the, especially off the catch, like we've seen, or they don't find somebody else to do it, like Duncan Robinson's 3-point shooting and floor spacing is very important to this current roster construction. And in that way, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, he has to be playing minutes. And then in those minutes, can you make sure and you win those minutes by it not just being given up on the other end of the floor? So I think it is interesting to track. Michael asks, is Duncan approximately as bad as Beasley at defense, or is there a gap? My feel right now is that Beasley was not this bad at the point of attack. Beasley wasn't a great defender, but I feel like he had a little bit better of an opportunity to stay in front than what Robinson does. And I don't even think it's like Robinson is trying. I just literally don't think he can hold up even as much as he wants to.
Yeah, Bees just has quicker feet and he's a little bit more springy. And I think Duncan maps the floor really well. You see it on offense, especially with some of the secondary reads he makes. But defensively, he knows where to be. It's just, I think, lacking the raw foot speed and physical ability to stay in front of people. And I think Bees a little bit smaller, just a little bit more mobile, just had a little bit more of an advantage on that end. So that's what it is to me. It's not that Duncan doesn't know where to be. It's just when he's there, just actually sticking with the assignment. That could be tough.
Chuck says Duncan fell out of the rotation in Miami because of his defense at times. And I guess that's my point is I don't know if he can fall out of the rotation in Detroit because of what they need in terms of his 3-point shooting. I'm just going to look at the rest of the roster in regards to this. So when you just go by attempts, this is concerning, guys. So Cade is second on the team in 3-point attempts. He's at 29%. Tobias is third, only played 6 games. He's at 29%. Ron Holland is fourth at only 3.5 attempts per game. He's at 29. Javonte Green is fifth on this team in 3-point attempts per game at 31. Then you get to Stu at 39%. Karis LeVert, who we're going to talk about, I promise, he needs his flowers, is at 44%. And again, I know we haven't seen J.I. yet, but that is why I think it's at least worth or appropriate to talk about Duncan Robinson in the playoffs, because right now his 3-point shooting is vital to this team and their spacing. So I think we need to talk about Karis LeVert. We'll do that right after this.
All right, we're back with segment 3. I think it was 2 episodes ago that you expressed a little skepticism of how Karis is fit with the team, and this past week, he's every time he's checked in, it feels like you could just feel his impact being made on both ends. Whether it's those big 3-pointers he hit at the end of the first and even second and third quarter in Philly last Sunday, some of the defensive plays he's made off the bench at home, just the way he closed out against Philly down the stretch of the fourth on Friday. He's the secondary playmaking. I think everything you talk about what he could do on paper, he's done. And it's been sorely needed, I think, for this team, the way he's been able to come in and just immediately make things happen on offense.
Yeah, over his last 5 games. So it's not just like this 3-game stretch that we've kind of referenced, or these last 2 games. 13 points. He's 59% from the field, 53% from 3 on almost 4 attempts. You mentioned some big ones that he hit. Was it the Philly game that he went back-to-back off the dribble? Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, Maxey had a tough bucket, and then LeVert answers with the 3. Maxey makes another shot in the mid-range, and LeVert answered with another 3-pointer off the dribble. So just really, really nice stuff from him in big moments. But yeah, I think the thing that's impressed me the most is his ability to attack the paint, break down the defense, and create for his teammates. He's only averaging 4 assists over those 5 games, but the last 2, the 2 games this week we're really talking about, 5 assists and 6 assists respectively, along to go with some really good defense. I think he's been really good defensively since, I kind of brought up that I didn't think he had played well up to this point in the season. It's been really good, quite frankly, Omari on both ends. And I think this is kind of what you need. Listen, between Daniss, between LeVert, between Ivy, between Asar doing it a little bit. Maybe you don't have like a true backup point guard, depending on where people land on Daniss, but you have a lot of different options that I think over the next 30, 40 games, Detroit can try and figure out if they feel like they have enough or if they need to go make a addition at the deadline.
Yeah, I think Karras, like, just as a secondary or tertiary, like whatever you want to call him, playmaker, he fits really well. Like, whether or not he could be like full-time point guard type. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you need that with this team. Like, I think, but you already have Cade, obviously, who's, I think he's tied with LaMelo for first in the East with 9.9 assists. Maybe LaMelo's played a game since I last checked. I don't know. But for 36 minutes a night, K is going to have the ball. So it's just those other 12 minutes, right? And between Daniss and I think Karras, like even with Cade out, these last few games, the playmaking's been great. What they had, I need to check, but I know they had something like 36 assists on 41 shots. In one of their recent games, like Karras has been part of that. Like he said, 11 assists in his past 2 games. But yeah, I mean, it leads me to believe that you are probably fine if Karras is going to do that. If he's going to penetrate the defense, get inside, find open shooters, you have Daniss doing that as well. I think you feel pretty good about it, and that's exactly what you wanted from Karras. It's not just stepping up and being assertive in those moments with his shot, but continuing to move the ball and swing it. And he's done both of those at a high level.
YouTube user says, I think Karras deserves some credit for being able to take on multiple roles on both sides of the ball. It's hard to play different roles for many players. Duncan, for example, kind of just plays the same role and isn't crazy flexible. And I would agree. Like he had to go from like filling this backup role to now I think he was still coming off the bench in these games. I don't think he started a game yet this year, but the role was more because they really needed the ball handling. I came away very encouraged that maybe he can do it, like you said, in those 12 minutes. Like any high leverage game, Cade Cunningham is going to play 36 minutes, right? We get into the playoffs and his minutes are going to be 36, maybe even 40 if you get into game 6s and 7s and all of that. And so all you need to do is be able to survive in those non-minutes, or in the regular season when he's missing games, or you do only want to play him 30 minutes on a night, can Karras / Jenkins / Ivy / Asar at least take care of the ball and get you into quality offense for 18 minutes. So I think I thought he had a good week. Hopefully it was just the hamstring coming back from it, integrating into the team. And that's, somebody asked a little bit, is this the Caris LeVert that he really is, or was it the start of it? This is who I thought they were going to get. What we've seen the last 4 or 5 games, from Pistons Fan 11 is what I think Caris LeVert is. Mel75 says, hit the like button, nasty dogs. Was that a JB quote that there are a bunch of nasty dogs? Is that what it was?
JB said it. Yeah. JB said, we just have a bunch of nasty dogs in the locker room. And then Daniss followed up with nasty dogs and nasty boys. So take your pick. Whatever one works better, I guess.
All right, we got to talk about one more player, and then we'll get to some questions here. YouTube user, I don't want to be negative. I love Ron, but he's been underwhelming trying to take on a larger role. I think that's probably my one negative through this stretch. It's not an overwhelming indictment or anything of who I think Ron Holland can be as a player. I did think that these 2 specific games, Omari, were great opportunities for him to maybe show the potential of an expanded role down the road. And at the very least, Ron Holland didn't take advantage of those 2 opportunities.
Yeah, I think he was kind of trying to find his place these past few games, where it just didn't seem like he had the same decisiveness that he's had, I think, in his best games, especially when getting to the rim. I think he's had some ill-advised drives or some ill-advised approaches to the rim, a little out of control. I mean, we're talking about a 3-game sample size, and I think it just overlapped with them having some injuries. So, you expect him to maybe be a guy that steps up, and it just didn't quite materialize in that way. We have a much greater sample size of him being an impact player. So these past few games don't worry me too much. But it is also fair to point out that, that's probably a moment where you expect that he'll be among the guys who could kind of help you, carve out some of those games. And it just felt like, with certain guys out, he was trying to figure out exactly how he fit, and it just wasn't quite there. Cade and Asar questionable tomorrow going into Indiana. Duran's probable. Another game, if Cade and Asar miss, where Ron will have a chance to, step in and, show what growth he's shown, I think, up until this past week. He did knock down some threes. I thought he had some nice drives Friday night, but just that full game impact has not been there for him yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's important here is, for me, it was, can he go out and get 20 a game, right? Can he take a real usage and show this potential, not even for the rest of this year, but hey, in these couple of games, I went out and I really got buckets as maybe not even the primary guy, but a real focus of the offense. And that 2 years down the road, that's a role I can really fill. And it just wasn't able to. To me, it was, I don't even want to say it was a missed opportunity, but it was an opportunity. I was excited to see what he'd be able to do with it. And it didn't really flourish in any sort of way or stand out in any way. That doesn't mean I don't think he's still going to be an impactful player in this league. And you're right, it doesn't take away from the larger sample we have seen from him. Just to give the numbers, over the last 4 games where his usage has been up in terms of field goal attempts, 8 points on 27-19, only got to the line 6 times in 4 games, 4 rebounds, negative assist to turnover ratio. I will say it surprised me today as I was going through the NBA at large steals per game. He was actually there at 1.8, so just under 2 steals per game. Him and Asar are tied for the league with the Pistons. But, the catch and the 3-point percentage is down below 30% now. All of these or almost all of them are catch and shoot variety. So we'll see where that goes. And then even at the rim, he's just above 50% according to Synergy. So again, I was hoping to see maybe just a real, I wanted to come on here and be like, man, Ron Holland's really showing that potential to be this two-way, really go get buckets, score 20 a game at some point in his career. It just didn't happen in these 2 games. It's okay. It doesn't speak to who he is just as a general NBA player, but we'll see if he gets those opportunities and maybe how he can or cannot take advantage of them the next time they present themselves. A couple of injury things here. Anything on J.I.? I know you kind of mentioned it earlier. I'm sure people are really thinking about it now. Some of the videos are out of him shooting and all of that.
Yeah, no definitive date. His 4-week date passed last week, and we were told that he's just not getting back to on-court work. So, no, nothing definitive, but he is trending in the right direction.
And then I do think this was interesting because I don't think anybody is trying to call the Pistons out, but you've worked for, other NBA teams covering them. Do they keep their stuff a little more close to the vest than other teams in terms of injury information in your experience?
No, I don't have that perception at all. I think every fan base has the perception that their NBA team is not as forthcoming with injuries as they should be. I know Grizzlies fans felt that way when I was there and still feel that way, especially with all the injuries they've had. And I know they had Steven Adams a few years ago, have a PCO issue that, they wanted more clarity on, and eventually he had more procedures on it. I think every team goes through this. Philly fans are constantly frustrated with, the injury issues or lack of details that they have there. So I think that's just a league-wide perception for our fan bases. I don't think the Pistons are unique in that area.
Yeah, so Wes, the NBA reports injuries to the reevaluation period. The NFL reports return dates. From this, NBA fans get upset, in my opinion.
And it's also a little different because you're comparing 1 game a week to 3 or 4 games a week. So the NBA just tends to have more rolling dates. Well, some of it is just you can't put a return date weeks in advance without really knowing, right? Some of it is just you have to see how the body responds from game to game. So I do think some of the issues fans have are a bit unrealistic, just given that the human body is human body. It's not like your car's in the shop. Things don't always go how you expect. But I also think the NFL just has certain advantages given the way that their season is mapped out that, you could give more certainty it's a 4-week injury. So around this date, you'll probably see them return.
The NFL also has to make roster decisions for a specific game leading up. I mean, it's the day of the game, but are you going to elevate practice squad guys? How many guys are active versus the, whatever it is, 7 inactives and all of that? Yeah, I don't find myself getting as frustrated about this, but I do see this from fans a lot in terms of the injury stuff. JWow33 says, why hasn't Isaac Jones seen the floor yet? I know he's played the last 2 nights with the Motor City Cruise. Maybe there's just still a little bit of getting integrated with the team and the organization. I think Bobby actually rolled his ankle in one of the games. I was actually watching the game the other day, and it looked like he rolled his ankle
He did. Bobby's out tomorrow too.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like, listen, I understood the Isaac Jones signing was weird to me a little bit. With it being non-guaranteed, it doesn't really matter, but I don't feel like they've needed him. And again, maybe he's just trying to get comfortable, with the roster. I think you gave this update, but Cade and Jalen Duren status for the game on Monday night, Omari.
Yeah. JD's been upgraded to probable and Cade is still questionable.
Yeah. So we'll hopefully start to see some people back. Let's go fund me for Pistons high tops. Yeah. So one more here, and then we'll get to the tornado question. Can you guys name at least 3 realistic targets you would like for this team? No Name says Max Christie, Jordan Hawkins, or Trey Murphy. Obviously, Trey Murphy would be really good. Jordan Hawkins would be an interesting one, depending on where he ends up with that team. I'm just going to look at some of the teams that may be in the market for actually trading guys off. Any guys, the Kings sound like they might sell. The Dallas Mavericks. I don't know what the Pacers are going to decide to do after their star. Clippers maybe could be in this boat eventually. Memphis, somebody maybe if they try to move on from Ja. We get a Corey Kispert here. That'd be an interesting name.
We're still so early in the season. I don't even really want to throw any names out there. I'll say Trey Murphy always comes up, and he's just a good young guy on a good deal. So even with the Pelicans having some of the issues that they're having, of all the guys that they could trade, he just doesn't strike me as a likely player that they would trade unless you're just giving him something that you can't pass up. I like the idea of Jordan Hawkins. I mean, he was an elite shooter in college. His shot hasn't really fallen through a few seasons here in the league, but if you could just take a flyer on him and that shot begins to connect, then I think he's somebody that could make an impact. Max Christie, my guy Cormac Carl Christie, former Spartan. I've always liked his game. Like I think he'd be a great fit here in Detroit. Like again with Dallas, like he's like outside of AD, he's like the one player of value you got in that Luka deal. And I mean, he's been a good player. He doesn't strike me as somebody they would be eager to trade. But I mean, if he's available, absolutely, you make that call. This is something that we can revisit for sure. Like it's just so early in the season. I think some teams are still figuring out exactly where they fall in the East. And then you've got teams that are struggling like Boston and Indiana that are just expecting some, guys to come back from injury before they can go out and compete again. So that's something we can revisit. But out of those 3 guys, if you're taking a flyer on somebody, Jordan Hawkins is probably the most likely one.
Yeah, it's an interesting name, and he fits the idea of like a movement shooter in the ilk that Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley were. Obviously nowhere near the pedigree in the NBA of those guys. Sean Haddock says, hit the like button. We need more Pistons live streams. We agree. Wes says Herb Jones, Anthony Black, Keon Ellis. Yeah, get Keon Ellis out of Sacramento, get him somewhere where they'll actually play him. I think a name that if Detroit doesn't like their guard situation, I think I think Colin Sexton is really good. I think he's a 3rd guard on a playoff team. I just don't know that he makes sense for Detroit. It just kind of depends on how things shake out. But yeah, I think we have to see where this team is at the deadline. Somebody said it earlier, Jaden Ivey. We have to see what Jaden Ivey is or isn't, because he's so much hinges on, is the 3-point shooting there? And what does his role end up being? And where does that slot everybody else? And all of that. Once they have that answered a little bit, then you can figure out, do you need another guard or are you set? Or as the Bishop says, does it end up needing to be power forward? What if Isaiah Stewart at the 4 actually looks really good all year, and then you decide you don't need that because the 3-point shooting with him is real? So I think we need a little bit more sample size before we make any of these decisions. Yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I think it's fun to talk about names and I enjoy it. But I don't know that we can give a definitive name until we see just a little bit more shooting, like floor spacing, right? If you can give me that, to me, that's the biggest thing I'm worried about right now with this Pistons team. Yeah.
And that's the other aspect too, is what area do the Pistons decide they eventually need to address? If you're trading for a guy like Max Christie, who, again, if you're Dallas, you're probably not going to trade one of the few guys on the roster that can consistently knock down a 3. But that does interfere a bit, with your team building, especially since he's a guy that you will have to pay at some point as well. So I think, J.I. was this team's quote-unquote big free agency signing. I do think they want to see what this team looks like with him before you make strong financial commitments outside the roster.
All right. Disclaimer for everybody who doesn't like when we don't talk about Pistons. We're going to finish off the last 2 or 3 minutes not talking about Detroit Piston basketball or the NBA at all. Derek Brown was actually the first comment in the chat tonight, and he asked, random question for Bryce. Have you ever seen a tornado in Kansas, and how often do they happen? Yes, I have seen a tornado. Ranny's parents' farm got hit 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Her dad was like really close to being not in the house and in the basement when it hit. We had to go down there and help clean everything up. And then they had to rebuild their sheds and all of that. My craziest tornado story, I wasn't there, but my roommate in college, we went to a movie in a nearby city about 30 miles away. And when we got out of the movie, his phone had like 50 missed calls, like legitimately all of these missed calls. And he finally calls back, in his hometown, which was 30 miles the other way, had gotten hit by like an F5 tornado, a 1 mile wide base tornado. You can look it up, Greensburg, Kansas tornado. And it completely destroyed the town. I went over the next day, and everywhere where there was a house, it just looked like it was just a pile of stuff. It was the most surreal scene I've ever seen with my own eyes. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. So most of them aren't like that. Most of them are rather small. Most of them, you can see them off in the distance out in the countryside. But in my lifetime, whenever I've been around here, I mean, a few different towns around, and it seems like one every year somewhere here in the Midwest gets hit. The funny thing is, my first summer in Washington, D.C., I'd only been there for a week or so. It was 4th of July, and we were going down on what's called the mall down there to watch the 4th of July fireworks show, and they cleared out the mall because there was a tornado warning in Washington, D.C. on July 4th. And so it was kind of crazy. You move from Kansas to Washington, D.C., and then your first week there, all of a sudden there's a tornado warning and all of that. But so anyway, that's Kansas tornado stories with Bryce for 3 minutes.
That was a super random question, Derek, but I'm glad you asked it, because when you asked it, I'm like, that's actually, I never thought about that. I have no tornado experience, knock on wood. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by them, but the more I learned about them, especially after hearing that, I don't think I have that fascination anymore. They mostly just sound scary.
Yeah, no, they are, it's scary because you just go to the basement and, hope, and hopefully you have a basement. But anyway, the Pistons are 11-2. Let's end positive and upbeat. 9 wins in a row gave Daniss Jenkins and Karis LeVert and Duncan Robinson and Paul Reed and Javonte Green all of their flowers that they deserve for their play. We got back-to-back Monday and Tuesday, and then what the rest of the week, Omari?
They're off 3 days, and then they play Milwaukee. It's every other day. So on the road, Milwaukee Saturday, Indiana Tuesday, or Monday, and then they play Boston Wednesday, and then fly back on Thanksgiving. So
all right. So yeah, tough games against the Hawks, even without Trae Young. They've played well recently. Obviously the Bucks, but those are sandwiched in between 2 games against the Pacers, and then you get into a decent little stretch here where you play they play the Bucks 3 times over the next couple weeks maybe. The Hawks a couple times, the Magic and the Heat, the Celtics, who I think are right at 500 right now. So you definitely need to get those wins against the Pacers, and yeah, we'll see with the rest, and hopefully we see this team healthy. So hopefully everybody enjoyed. Thank you for joining us in the comments. I know the Lions are about to play, and so everybody's gearing up for Sunday Night Football. If you listen after the fact, thank you for your support on, wherever you listen to podcasts. But O2, take it away, my guy.
Of course, big thanks to our audio producer, Robin Chan, our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols, and then big shout out to Wes Davenport, as always, and we'll talk to you all next week.